The professional golf landscape was already showing signs of instability when Bryson DeChambeau delivered an unexpected bombshell, accusing golf's governing bodies of significant betrayal. What followed was even more surprising. NFL legend Tom Brady entered the conversation, and rather than taking a diplomatic approach, he launched a direct critique at the PGA Tour's core leadership, transforming a simmering dispute into an all-out public confrontation. What began as a contained disagreement evolved into a heated battle that left the entire golf community bewildered and searching for answers. The sport faces an existential threat, and stakeholders are desperately seeking clarity. For those interested in the true narrative behind these headlines, stay engaged with our coverage. The fragile peace before the storm. Imagine a battlefield where the silence itself feels oppressive, where you can sense the inevitable eruption approaching. This perfectly captured the atmosphere in professional golf during spring 2024. The initial shock from the June 6, 2023 framework agreement between the PGA Tour and Saudi Arabia's public investment fund had transformed into an uneasy, precarious stillness. The situation resembled a Cold War. Public confrontations had subsided. Legal proceedings were suspended, yet the fundamental divisions remained unresolved. Everything existed beneath a thin veneer of forced tranquility. On one front stood the PGA Tour, embodying tradition, heritage, and established values while struggling to navigate an unprecedented crisis. On the opposite side was LIV Golf, the well-funded disruptor with its innovative shotgun starts, team formats, and roster of prominent controversial players. Caught between these forces was a sport being torn in conflicting directions. Simultaneously, for players who remained loyal to the PGA Tour, their commitment felt like defending the sport's integrity and preserving its fundamental values. However, for those who joined LIV Golf, while the financial compensation was substantial, they faced a growing concern about their diminishing relevance in golf's mainstream narrative. They competed in locations like Singapore and Adelaide, accumulating significant earnings. But their world ranking points, the true measure of professional standing, were evaporating. They were becoming marginalized figures within a system they once commanded. The ranking controversy. The official World Golf Ranking, OWGR, became the new dividing line. The organization's decision not to award ranking points to LIV Golf events was presented as maintaining competitive standards, at least according to the golf establishment. For players on LIV Golf, however, this felt like deliberate exclusion, systematic effort to force them into professional irrelevance despite their continued competition. The apparent peace was illusory, requiring only one courageous voice to shatter the silence and expose the sport's internal contradictions. Bryson DeChambeau breaks the silence on Tuesday, May 7, 2024. Former U.S. Open champion and Crushers GC captain Bryson DeChambeau appeared on SiriusXM's Fairways Life for what seemed like a routine interview. The conversation was unremarkable until it shifted to the OWGR discussion. This time, rather than expressing typical diplomatic frustration, DeChambeau delivered a passionate, direct accusation that questioned the institution's fundamental integrity. Coming from DeChambeau, known for his analytical, methodical approach to golf, the emotional intensity was particularly striking. He abandoned his characteristic, measured analysis and spoke with raw, unfiltered conviction. DeChambeau called the OWGR's refusal to grant points laughable, but he went significantly further. He made an explicit, serious allegation. The OWGR had lied to LIV Golf participants. DeChambeau explained the situation in detail. LIV Golf had been instructed to modify its tournament format to qualify for ranking points, with the primary requirement being implementation of a promotion and relegation system. According to DeChambeau, LIV Golf complied with these demands, made the requested adjustments, and satisfied every stated requirement only to have their application rejected regardless. From his perspective, this wasn't merely a bureaucratic denial but a deliberate betrayal. Using the word lead in professional sports, discourse carries significant weight, implying intentional deception and fundamental breach of trust. This wasn't a player complaining about an unfavorable decision, it was a direct accusation of institutional bad faith against the organization responsible for golf's global competitive structure. With this single interview, DeChambeau fundamentally reframed the controversy. The debate was no longer about tournament formats or structural differences. It had become a story about alleged broken promises and institutional dishonesty. DeChambeau didn't approach the issue diplomatically. He delivered a forceful challenge to what he believed was systemic corruption. The accusation was public. Its reverberations were just beginning. Tom Brady enters the arena 7 days following DeChambeau's statements. The golf world intensely debated his allegations and their implications. The discussion remained largely within golf circles, until someone from an entirely different realm intervened, a figure whose celebrity transcended the sport entirely. On Tuesday, May 14, 2024, exactly 1 week after DeChambeau's interview, Tom Brady arrived in Louisville, Kentucky for the PGA Championship. The legendary 7-time Super Bowl champion, synonymous with excellence, leadership, and championship success, was there as part of ESPN's College Game Day broadcasting team. When he received the microphone, the conversation quickly pivoted from college sports to the turmoil engulfing professional golf. Brady, who is a minority owner of the WNBA's Las Vegas Aces and maintains friendships with players from both tours, didn't offer diplomatic platitudes. He addressed the situation directly and forcefully. With the confidence of someone who has achieved the pinnacle of his sport, Brady stated clearly that golf desperately needed improved leadership. He acknowledged the division explicitly. There's a lot of division. And division sucks. Then he delivered the statement that resonated throughout the sport. The PGA Tour leadership needs to do a better job. Consider the significance of this moment. This wasn't a frustrated golfer venting about internal politics. This was Tom Brady, an icon of American sports culture, publicly declaring that golf's most powerful governing body was failing in its responsibilities. The statement carried enormous weight. Brady wasn't speaking abstractly. He was implicitly criticizing Commissioner Jason Monahan and attributing the sport's chaos to leadership failures. The earthquake effect. This wasn't a minor commentary. It was a seismic intervention. Brady's credibility is unassailable, and his expertise in building championship cultures is universally recognized. His criticism of the PGA Tour leadership instantly validated every skeptic and disappointed fan who believed the sport lacked clear direction. He wasn't simply supporting DeChambeau. He was amplifying that message to a global audience that the insular golf world couldn't dismiss. The quiet internal rebellion now had a high-profile advocate, and the reaction was explosive. The already divided golf community fractured further in real time. Social media became a digital battleground. Traditionalists and PGA Tour supporters immediately counterattacked, accusing Brady of hypocrisy by referencing his involvement with the short-lived Alliance of American Football League. They questioned whether an NFL legend had standing to comment on golf's business affairs, viewing his intervention as an outsider attacking an institution already defending itself against a well-funded sovereign wealth fund attempting to purchase influence in the sport. They staunchly defended Commissioner Monahan, arguing he inherited an impossible situation. Conversely, a significant contingent praised Brady's candidness. LIV Golf supporters and many neutral observers commended him for voicing what others feared to say publicly. They saw him as speaking truth to power, a high-profile figure with nothing to lose and no reason to moderate his assessment. He articulated what many were thinking but wouldn't state openly. Fans began echoing Brady's characterization that leadership had been reactive rather than proactive, allowing the sport to fragment incrementally. Previous statements from players like Rory McIlroy, who had reversed his position and advocated for reunification, suddenly reemerged as supporting evidence. McIlroy's comment, "I think we should let them come back," represented a dramatic reversal that now seemed to anticipate Brady's broader critique. The deeper questions, the division transcended the tours themselves and manifested in fans' perspectives. Who bore responsibility for this crisis? Was it the PGA Tour for appearing inflexible and potentially hypocritical? Was it LIV Golf for its controversial funding and approach? Or was it, as Brady and DeChambeau suggested, failed leadership that allowed the situation to devolve into chaos? The conflict was no longer about organizational allegiances, it concerned the sport's fundamental identity. Comment sections became forums for confusion and anger. One fan wrote, "Brady is 100% right." Several responses down. Another retorted, "Brady should stick to football." Golf's community was deeply divided, with the most prominent voices in this debate being a legendary quarterback and an iconoclastic professional golfer. The center was not holding once the initial outrage subsided. An uncomfortable truth remained. Both DeChambeau and Brady, regardless of how dramatic their statements appeared, were identifying a crisis that demanded acknowledgement, examining the core choix de combo's fundamental. Claim was straightforward yet serious. The OWGR arbitrarily changed its requirements. The organization stated it rejected LIV Golf because the tour was too restrictive, lacking adequate relegation mechanisms and combining team and individual competition formats. The critical question persists. If LIV Golf was instructed to implement specific changes and did so, what justified the continued rejection? This pattern suggests systemic bias and defensive protectionism, which undermines the sport's integrity. Brady's critique of leadership is equally valid. Can anyone objectively assess the past 2 years and conclude the PGA Tour's strategy was successful? The secretive negotiations with the PIF deals developed without informing the loyal players who had rejected substantial offers represented a significant betrayal. The failure to finalize an agreement with the Saudi backers left the sport in prolonged uncertainty. High-profile players departed for rival tours, and the competitive product fans valued began deteriorating. From Brady's perspective, as someone renowned for leadership in team sports, his words functioned as a mirror reflecting the PGA Tour's shortcomings back at the organization, revealing an unflattering image. He wasn't merely criticizing, he was diagnosing a fundamental problem, the disease of division. The sport was weakening, confusing its audience, and alienating its stars. Remarkably, it was the rebel and the outsider who articulated the questions everyone else avoided. Where is the vision? Where is the unity? Who is genuinely in control? The absence of clear answers was more damning than any inflammatory interview or public accusation. The current state and future implications. Where does this leave professional golf? What is the lasting impact of those volatile 7 days in May 2024? This wasn't simply a news cycle, it represented a genuine turning point. The conflict has escalated permanently. It's no longer just PGA Tour versus LIV Golf. Now it's the entire system being challenged by its critics. When those critics include someone with DeChambeau's precision and someone with Brady's enormous influence, the establishment faces a serious credibility problem. The sport cannot continue operating through vague press releases and closed-door meetings. That approach has lost effectiveness. Golf stands paralyzed because its future appears increasingly uncertain. Traditional structures are deteriorating. The claimed moral authority looks compromised, and fans are exhausted by the ongoing chaos. Golf has reached a crossroads, with every potential direction appearing problematic. One path leads to permanent fragmentation: rival tours, divided attention, and diminished prestige. Another suggests a forced merger, an unstable partnership created from financial necessity rather than shared vision. The path fans actually want: one unified tour featuring the world's best players, competing in genuinely significant events, seems more distant than ever. The final verdict, Tom Brady and Bryson DeChambeau, didn't merely generate controversy, they effectively announced the end of the old order. They exposed a sport experiencing a profound crisis of authority, a game desperately needing leadership that unifies rather than divides. The sport exists without clear leadership, with the position of authority vacant and the battle for control intensifying. The ultimate question, one that will echo through every clubhouse and every major championship going forward, confronts the entire sport directly. In this civil war for golf's soul, did the most devastating criticism come from outside the sport's traditional power structure? The answer may determine whether professional golf can rebuild its fractured foundation or whether the division becomes permanent, fundamentally altering what the sport represents to players and fans worldwide.